"Stay away from Willow Ridge, Margaret. Promise me you'll never go there." Those words, spoken with unusual force, were among the few absolute demands my husband Thomas made during our 26 years together. I had honored his request, though questions flickered through my mind whenever he mentioned, in passing, his childhood in the British Columbia countryside, a place he'd abandoned and never looked back. But Thomas was gone now. A sudden stroke had stolen him from me without warning, without goodbye. At 54, I found myself a widow with an angry son and an emptiness in my soul where certainty once resided. "Mrs. Harrison?" The voice of Thomas's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, pulled me back to the present moment. We sat in his mahogany-paneled office 3 weeks after the memorial service, death's finality reduced to documents requiring signatures. Bureaucracy masquerading as closure. "There's one additional matter," he said carefully, sliding a small wooden box across the polished surface between us. Inside rested an old brass key attached to a pine tree keychain, beside a sealed envelope bearing my name in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. What is this?" I asked, the key heavy and cold against my palm. "Your husband acquired property in British Columbia 5 years ago," Mr. Caldwell explained, adjusting his reading glasses. "Per his explicit instructions, you were to learn of its existence only after his death. The deed has been transferred into your name. Property taxes are settled for the next decade." Property in British Columbia? My mind struggled to process this information. Thomas hadn't owned anything beyond our modest home in Seattle. We'd lived comfortably on his architect's salary and my earnings as a librarian, but we'd never been people of means or secrets. "It's called Willow Ridge Estate," Mr. Caldwell continued, consulting his notes. "Records indicate it was his childhood home, though ownership changed hands multiple times before he repurchased it." The place? The forbidden place? The location that had caused Thomas's gentle features to harden whenever conversation drifted too close to it. "Mrs. Harrison? There's something else." Mr. Caldwell's voice dropped lower. "The property has appreciated significantly in recent months. We've received several inquiries regarding its availability." "Appreciated? It's farmland, isn't it?" "Yes, but—" he hesitated. "Approximately 2 years ago, valuable timber rights were identified in that region. Your husband declined numerous offers from lumber corporations." My head spun with unanswered questions. Thomas had never mentioned timber, investments, or any property acquisition. How had he afforded such a purchase? Why conceal it from me, from our son Daniel? With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading these words, I've departed too soon, and I'm deeply sorry. There's so much I should have shared but couldn't find the courage to voice. Willow Ridge is yours now. I've dedicated the past 5 years transforming it from the shattered place of my youth into something beautiful. Something worthy of you. I know I made you promise never to visit. I release you from that promise now. In fact, I'm asking, go there once before deciding its fate. In the main house office, there's a computer. The password is the day we first met, followed by your maiden name. I love you, Maggie, more deeply than words can express. Thomas." I pressed the letter against my chest, vision blurring with tears. Even in death, Thomas continued to surprise me, to reveal hidden layers I'd never suspected existed. "I need to see this place," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." Mr. Caldwell nodded slowly. "However, I should inform you. Thomas's family in Canada has challenged the will. His 2 brothers claim he lacked mental capacity when he reacquired the family property." That's absurd. Anger flared hot in my chest. Thomas was the most rational, thoughtful person I've ever known. Nevertheless, they've filed legal objections. Given the property's current valuation, this matter could become complicated. I tucked the key into my coat pocket, unexpected determination settling over me like armor. "I'm going to British Columbia, Mr. Caldwell, tomorrow." 48 hours later, after hastily arranged flights and a lengthy drive through the BC interior, I stood before imposing wooden gates marked Willow Ridge Estate in wrought iron lettering. Beyond them stretched a property far more extensive and impressive than anything I'd imagined. Rolling meadows, stands of towering pines turning bronze with autumn, and in the distance, a substantial house surrounded by several outbuildings, all immaculately maintained. This wasn't some dilapidated family farm. This was a genuine estate. The key turned smoothly in the gate's lock. As I drove up the winding gravel path, my heart hammered with equal parts anticipation and apprehension. What mysteries had Thomas preserved here? What aspects of himself had he kept hidden throughout our marriage? The main house was a stunning craftsman-style structure with a wraparound veranda and floor-to-ceiling windows. Nothing about it suggested the pain Thomas had always associated with his childhood home. This place had been cherished, restored, reimagined with love. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the front entrance. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. I stepped across the threshold into my husband's secret world. What I discovered inside made me gasp, my knees weakening as I gripped the doorframe for support. The entryway opened into a magnificent great room with exposed timber beams and a riverstone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath. It was the books. Not just books, but everywhere I looked. First editions of classic literature in glass display cases. Illuminated manuscripts framed on the walls. A library ladder reaching toward ceiling-high shelves packed with volumes. Rare collections I'd only dreamed of encountering. My life's passion, the obsession Thomas had always encouraged but never quite shared, surrounded me in a bibliophile's paradise. And there, on a desk beside the window overlooking endless forest, sat a silver laptop with a single white lily laid across its closed lid. Before I could take another step, the crunch of tires on gravel announced unexpected arrivals. Through the front window, I watched a black Range Rover pull up behind my rental vehicle. 3 men emerged, all bearing the unmistakable Harrison features Thomas had carried. Tall builds, sandy hair, strong cheekbones. The Harrison brothers had arrived, and from their stern expressions, they hadn't come to welcome their late brother's widow to Canada. The men approached with the confident stride of people who believed they belonged there. I quickly closed and locked the front door, pulse racing. Through the side window, I observed them pause on the veranda, conferring among themselves before the eldest, a silver-haired version of Thomas with colder eyes, knocked sharply. "Mrs. Harrison, we know you're inside. We should have a conversation." His voice carried the same Canadian accent that had softened Thomas's speech when he was exhausted or emotional. I remained silent, backing away from the door. Thomas's warnings about his family had always been vague but emphatic. Now, confronted with their unexpected arrival, instinct urged caution. The knocking came again, more insistent. "Margaret, I'm Richard Harrison, Thomas's older brother. These are our brothers, Graham and Marcus. We're here regarding the estate." Of course they were. Not here about Thomas, not to meet the wife their brother had loved for 26 years. Here about the suddenly valuable property. I glanced at the laptop on the desk. Whatever answers I needed might be there, not with the strangers demanding entry. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive knocking, I moved to the desk, opened the computer and entered the password, 041598 Carter. The screen illuminated immediately, opening to a folder labeled for Margaret. Inside were hundreds of video files, each dated, starting from 3 weeks ago. The day after his memorial, and extending a full year into the future. With trembling fingers, I clicked the first one. Thomas's face filled the screen. Not the gaunt, pale version from his final weeks, but healthy, vibrant, clearly recorded months earlier. He smiled directly into the camera, that crooked grin that had always made my heart skip. "Hello, Maggie. If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've come to Willow Ridge despite my years of making you promise not to." He chuckled softly. "I should have known you wouldn't resist, especially after Caldwell informed you about it." A lump formed in my throat. Even now he knew me so well. "I've created a video for every day of your first year without me. 1 year of me keeping you company while you grieve. 1 year of explaining everything I should have told you while I was alive." He looked down briefly, then back at the camera with determination. Starting with why I bought back the place I swore I'd never set foot on again. The knocking outside had stopped. Through the window I could see the men returning to their vehicle, retrieving documents, conferring with severe expressions. Thomas continued. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, a hereditary condition I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 3 to 7 years. I chose not to tell you or Daniel. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our final years overshadowed by illness. His eyes softened. I wanted to live fully with you until the end, not slowly fade in front of you. Shock and anger surged through me. He'd hidden his diagnosis, made medical decisions without me, denied me the chance to prepare, to treasure our final moments knowingly. I know you're angry right now, he said, as if reading my thoughts across time. You have every right to be. But I hope you'll understand I made this choice from love, not deception. The men outside were making phone calls now, pacing the gravel with the frustrated energy of thwarted entitlement. When I received my diagnosis, I decided to use whatever time remained to create something meaningful for you. You always loved rare books, always talked about having a proper library someday where you could catalog and preserve first editions. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the estate I'd fled at 19, vowing never to return. He leaned closer to the camera. What my brothers don't know is that I legally purchased the estate from our father before he died. The old man was bankrupt after years of failed ventures, drinking away the family assets. He sold it to me for a fraction of its value, desperate for cash, swearing me to secrecy from my brothers who still believed they'd inherit it someday. This explained the legal challenge. They believed they had rights to property Thomas had legitimately purchased. The estate was in ruins when I bought it, Maggie, just like when I was young. But this time, I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip these past 5 years, I was here overseeing renovations, building something for you. Outside, the brothers had approached the door again. This time, Richard held a document against the window for me to see. Some kind of court order. My brothers will come for it, Thomas continued in the video, his expression hardening. They never wanted the estate until last year when valuable timber rights were identified in the region. Suddenly, the worthless property they'd mocked me for buying was valuable. They'll try everything to take it from you. One of the brothers was on the phone again, his expression triumphant as he ended the call. In the bottom drawer of this desk is a red folder with every legal document you need. The estate is unquestionably yours. I made certain of it. Thomas's face softened again. But Maggie, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you, filled it with beauty for you, but I don't want it to become a burden. A vehicle was approaching, up the driveway, a police cruiser with Royal Canadian Mounted Police markings. The brothers watched its approach with satisfied expressions. One last thing, Thomas said. In the library's rare book room, you'll find a collection I've assembled over these 5 years. First editions of every author you've ever mentioned admiring. The curator I've hired will continue caring for them whether you're here or not. They're my final gift to you, along with the means to enjoy them. The video ended, freezing on Thomas's smiling face as knocking resumed at the door, more authoritative this time. Mrs. Harrison, RCMP. We need you to open the door, please. With a deep breath, I closed the laptop, retrieved the red folder from the drawer, and went to face whatever came next. As I reached for the door handle, my phone rang. Daniel, our son, calling from Seattle. I hesitated, then answered. Daniel, now's not a good time, Mom. His voice was tight with anger. Why didn't you tell me about Dad's estate, about the timber rights? His brothers just called offering a settlement if I helped them contest the will. What the hell is happening? So they'd reached my son already. The realization ignited something protective and fierce within me. They weren't just coming after me, they were trying to manipulate my grieving son. I'll explain everything later, I promised, watching the police officer exchange words with the brothers. But Daniel, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. These men are not our allies. Mom, if there's money involved, this isn't about money, I interrupted, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. This is about what your father wanted. Please trust me on this. After a moment of silence, he sighed. Fine, but call me back soon. I ended the call and opened the door to face a young RCMP officer flanked by 3 Harrison men whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. Mrs. Harrison, I'm Constable Davies. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing estate dispute. I smiled calmly, channeling the strength Thomas had always admired in me. Of course, Constable. But first, I think you should review these. I held out the red folder containing Thomas's documentation. My husband anticipated this exact situation. Richard stepped forward with a dismissive wave. Family property disputes are complicated, Constable. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused. Actually, I interrupted, I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widow standing on property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late husband's DNA. I turned to the officer. And I'd appreciate if you'd examine these documents before allowing anyone onto my property. The constable took the folder, his expression neutral as he began reviewing the contents. The Harrison brothers exchanged glances, their confidence visibly wavering for the first time. I thought of Thomas's video, of the secret he'd kept to spare Daniel and me unnecessary pain, of the magnificent gift he'd created in his final years. Whatever game his brothers were playing, I was determined not to lose the last tangible expression of my husband's love without a fight. The constable looked up from the documents, his expression changed. These appear to be in order, Mrs. Harrison. Clear deed transfer, properly notarized statements, even certified banking records of the original purchase. He turned to the brothers. Gentlemen, I don't see grounds for forcing an inspection today. This appears to be a matter for civil courts. Richard's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. That woman has no right. That woman, I interjected calmly, is Thomas Harrison's wife, and I have every right to be here. As the brothers reluctantly retreated to their vehicle, followed by the apologetic constable, I felt a strange sense of both loss and discovery. The husband I thought I knew completely had kept secrets, some painful, others breathtakingly beautiful. Now I faced a choice: retreat to the safety of my familiar life, or step fully into this unexpected legacy and the battle that came with it. I closed the door, walked back to the desk, and opened the laptop again. Tomorrow's video awaited, and with it, more pieces of the man I had loved, and was only now beginning to fully understand. Outside, the Harrison brothers might have lost this skirmish, but their expressions as they drove away made one thing abundantly clear: the war for Willow Ridge Estate had only just begun. I spent that first night in our estate, surrounded by evidence of his secret labor of love. Sleep eluded me, my mind churning with revelations. Thomas's hidden illness, the transformed estate, his brother's determination to claim it, and the hundreds of video messages awaiting me on the computer. At dawn, I explored the property properly for the first time. The main house was a masterpiece of restoration, blending original craftsman elements with modern luxuries. Every room reflected thoughtful consideration of my preferences, from the temperature-controlled rare book vault to the conservatory overlooking the western forests, perfect for morning tea. But it was the library that truly took my breath away. As promised in Thomas's video, an entire wing had been converted into a bibliophile's dream. Mahogany shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, organized with professional precision. Climate control systems hummed quietly. Soft lighting illuminated glass cases containing treasures I'd only seen in museums. "Good morning, ma'am." The voice startled me. A woman in her early 60s emerged from what appeared to be a cataloging room, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I'm Helen. Your husband hired me to manage the collection." "Margaret Harrison," I replied, extending my hand, though I suspected she already knew. "Please, call me Margaret." She nodded, a gentle smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Mr. Harrison spoke of you constantly during his visits. Said you had an intuitive understanding of literature that formal education could never teach. You knew my husband well?" Helen hesitated. "As well as he allowed anyone to know him, I suppose. He was here every few months for the past 5 years, overseeing everything personally. Never delegated a single decision about the collection if he could make it himself." That sounded like Thomas. Meticulous, hands-on, attentive to every detail. "The Hemingway first editions there," Helen continued, nodding toward a locked case containing pristine volumes. "He spent nearly a year tracking those down specifically. Said he remembered you mentioning once, decades ago, how you'd love to hold an original The Sun Also Rises." My heart clenched. A casual comment made 20 years ago, and Thomas had remembered. Did he? I hesitated, unsure how to frame the question. "Did my husband ever mention his health to you?" A shadow crossed Helen's weathered face. "Not directly. But these last 18 months he worked with increased urgency, added more pieces to the collection, expanded the preservation systems. Like a man racing against a clock only he could hear." The confirmation stung, but it also explained the driven quality I'd sensed in Thomas during his final year. I'd attributed it to work stress, never imagining he was creating all this while knowing his time was limited. His brothers were here yesterday, I said, watching Helen's reaction carefully. Her expression hardened. They'd been circling since the timber rights were discovered on neighboring properties, suddenly very interested in the family estate they hadn't visited in decades. What can you tell me about them? Helen secured a glass case before answering. Richard's the oldest, runs some development company in Vancouver, always acted like he was doing Thomas a favor by acknowledging him. Graham's the middle one, corporate lawyer, smooth talker. And Marcus is the youngest, followed Richard into real estate, always in his shadow. And their relationship with Thomas? Strained doesn't begin to cover it. From what I gathered, they tormented him as a boy. City boys who visited the estate reluctantly, looking down on him for staying to help your father-in-law maintain the place. Helen shook her head. When Thomas returned to purchase the property, they mocked him for wasting money on worthless land. Right up until the Thornton property, 2 estates over-discovered valuable timber. This aligned with the fragments Thomas had shared over the years. His difficult childhood, his escape to the United States for university, his reluctance to discuss his Canadian family. They'll be back, I said, more to myself than to Helen. Count on it. She nodded grimly. But Mr. Harrison prepared for that. He was always several steps ahead. Back at the house, I forced myself to eat breakfast before opening the laptop for today's video. Thomas appeared on screen, seated in what I now recognized as the estate's study. Good morning, Maggie. I hope you slept well in our home. He smiled, that crooked smile I missed with physical intensity. Today I want to show you something special. The camera moved as he carried it through the house, down a hallway I hadn't yet explored, stopping at a locked door. This room is for you alone. The key is in the top drawer of the nightstand. The antique silver one with the book engraving. I paused the video, went to the master bedroom, and found the key exactly where he described. Retracing Thomas's path from the video, I located the door, unassuming, situated at the end of the north wing. The key turned smoothly. I pushed the door open and gasped. A fully equipped writing studio filled the large corner room, bathed in perfect natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows. A custom desk, ergonomic chair, computer workstation, reference materials. Everything a writer could desire, arranged with loving precision. I hadn't written creatively in 25 years. After graduate school, I'd set aside my literary aspirations to work full-time, to help support us while Thomas built his architectural practice, to raise Daniel. Over the years, someday had become a distant dream, then eventually a bittersweet memory of a path not taken. The video continued, Thomas's voice pulling me back to the laptop I'd carried with me. You gave up so much for us, Maggie. Your writing was the first sacrifice, though you never complained. I always promised myself I'd give it back to you someday. Tears blurred my vision as I surveyed the studio. The professional-grade equipment, the inspiration library stacked neatly on custom shelves, the windows providing perfect, consistent, natural light. There's one more thing, Thomas continued. Check the cabinet below the window seat. I crossed to the cushioned window seat overlooking the eastern meadow, now golden in the morning light. Below it, built into the wall, was a cabinet I might have missed without direction. Inside lay several archival boxes. With trembling hands I lifted the first lid, then sank to my knees in shock. My manuscripts. All the work I'd created in graduate school, the stories and essays I thought had been lost in our moves over the years. Thomas had preserved them, protected them, kept them safe for 2.5 decades until he could return them to me in this perfect space. On top lay a thin manuscript I recognized immediately. My thesis. A collection of linked short stories about a young woman finding her voice. Thomas had asked to keep a copy the day I submitted it. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note in his precise script. She's still in there, Maggie. The woman who wrote with such passion and insight. I've given you the space. The rest is up to you. I clutched the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love and loss in equal measure. Thomas had seen me, truly seen me, in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. The sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway pulled me from this emotional moment. Moving to the studio window, I watched 2 cars approach. The now familiar black Range Rover of the Harrison brothers, and behind it, a sleek gray sedan I recognized instantly. Daniel had arrived, and from the way he emerged from his car and strode confidently toward the brothers, it appeared they had already begun working on him. My son, Thomas's son, with his father's sandy hair and my stubborn jaw, was smiling and shaking hands with the uncles he'd never met. Whatever fragile peace I'd found in Thomas's posthumous gifts evaporated in the face of this new complication. The battle for Willow Ridge Estate had just become significantly more personal. I watched from the window as Daniel exchanged friendly greetings with his uncles, his body language open and receptive. At 29, our son had his father's analytical mind and my determination, but lacked Thomas's patience and my caution. He had always been quick to form opinions, slow to revise them. My phone buzzed with a text from him, arrived with Uncle Richard and the others. "Coming in now, we need to talk, Uncle Richard." They'd known each other less than 24 hours, and already he was claiming family connection. I tucked Thomas's note into my pocket, locked the studio behind me, and went to face this new alliance. They entered without knocking. Daniel using the familiarity of a son's privilege, the brothers following in his wake like wolves behind an unwitting guide. "Mom." Daniel embraced me briefly, then stepped back, his eyes darting around the impressive entryway. "This place is incredible. Why didn't Dad ever tell us about it?" Before I could answer, Richard stepped forward, his resemblance to Thomas painfully sharp in the morning light. "Margaret, I believe we started on the wrong foot yesterday. We were surprised by your sudden appearance, just as you were surprised by ours." His conciliatory tone didn't match the calculating look in his eyes. Beside him, Graham and Marcus maintained carefully neutral expressions, though I noticed Graham clutching a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained legal documents. "Daniel," I said, ignoring Richard completely, "I thought we agreed you wouldn't engage with your father's brothers until we'd had a chance to talk." He flushed slightly. "They called again this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should at least hear them out in person." His chin lifted defiantly, the same expression he'd worn as a teenager challenging household rules. "Besides, they're my family too. Family you didn't know existed until 2 days ago," I reminded him gently. "Only because Dad kept them from us," he countered. "Just like he kept this whole place secret. Don't you think that's strange? What else was he hiding?" The question hit uncomfortably close to the revelations in Thomas's videos. He had hidden his illness, his property purchase, his reclamation of my artistic dreams. But his reasons had been born of love, not deception. "Your father had complicated relationships with his brothers," I said carefully. "He had reasons for the distance he maintained." Richard gave a dismissive wave. "Ancient history. Siblings clash, especially in difficult families like ours. What matters now is moving forward together." "Exactly," Daniel agreed with the earnestness of someone who believed they were being perfectly reasonable. "Uncle Richard has explained everything. This estate has been in the Harrison family for generations. Dad bought it from Grandpa Harrison, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers eventually." I suppressed a sigh. They'd been working on him for less than a day, and already he was parroting their version of events. "And the sudden interest in the property wouldn't have anything to do with the timber rights discovery?" I asked mildly. Graham stepped forward, opening his portfolio. "The resource management situation is just one aspect of a complex legal picture. We've prepared a fair settlement offer that honors Thomas's wishes while acknowledging the Harrison family's historic claim to the property." "We're prepared to be very generous," Richard added, placing a grandfatherly hand on Daniel's shoulder. "A 1/3 share to you, Margaret, 1/3 to Daniel, and 1/3 split among us brothers. Everyone benefits." Daniel looked at me expectantly, clearly already sold on the proposal. "It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell it all, walk away with millions, and Dad's family stays intact." "Your father, specifically, left this property to me," I said, meeting Richard's gaze steadily. "Not to you. Not to his brothers." Out of confusion and misplaced sentiment, Richard countered smoothly. Thomas wasn't thinking clearly in his final years. A flash of anger burned through me. My husband was perfectly sound of mind until the day he died. Then why all the secrecy? Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his brother's but no less pointed. Why hide the property purchase from his wife and son? Why the elaborate arrangements with the lawyer? These aren't the actions of a man thinking rationally. I thought of the videos, the renovated estate, the writing studio. each element meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing about it suggested confusion or impaired judgment. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice gentler now. "I know this is hard. Dad left us, left both of us, and now we're discovering all these secrets. But this proposal makes financial sense. We'd both be set for life." The door opened behind them, and Helen appeared, her weathered face concerned. "Everything all right, Mrs. Harrison? I saw the vehicles arrive." The brothers turned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Richard's eyes narrowed. "This is a family matter. Helen is my employee," I said firmly. "She's welcome in my home." "Actually," Graham interjected, "her employment status is among the disputed assets pending resolution of our legal claim." Helen stood her ground. "Mr. Harrison hired me personally, made me promise to look after the place and Mrs. Harrison if anything happened to him." "We'll be reviewing all staff appointments," Richard said dismissively. "I'd heard enough. I think it's time for you to leave. All of you." I looked pointedly at the brothers, then softened my gaze when it reached Daniel. "Except you, of course. You're always welcome to stay." "You're not even considering their offer?" Daniel asked, incredulous. "I'll review any written proposal with my own attorney," I replied, "but I won't be pressured in my own home." Robert's mask of conciliation slipped, revealing the hard businessman beneath. "This property is worth tens of millions with the timber rights. We can do this amicably, or we can make things very difficult." "Is that a threat?" I asked with more calmness than I felt. "A reality check," he corrected. "You're a librarian from Seattle facing a legal battle against opponents with significantly more resources. Thomas may have meant well, but he placed you in an untenable position." I thought of the red folder with its meticulous documentation, the videos showing Thomas's clear-headed planning, the transformed property that represented his final act of love. "I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing," I said quietly. "Now please leave. Daniel, you're welcome to stay for lunch if you'd like." He looked torn, glancing between me and his newly discovered uncles. "I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss." He kissed my cheek quickly. "Think about the offer, Mom, please." I watched them leave, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. In just 48 hours my son had been pulled into the orbit of men Thomas had spent his life avoiding. Whatever they were telling him was working. I could see it in his receptive posture, his quick adoption of their perspective. Helen waited until their vehicles had disappeared down the driveway before speaking. "Mrs. Harrison, there's something you should know, something your husband asked me not to mention unless absolutely necessary." I turned to her, mentally exhausted but forcing myself to focus. "What is it?" "It's about the true extent of the property, and what's really hidden here." She gestured toward the library wing. "We should walk. Some things shouldn't be discussed indoors where walls might have ears." As I followed her across the grounds, the morning sun illuminated the beautiful estate my husband had created in secret. Whatever revelation awaited me, I was certain of one thing. Thomas had anticipated this battle, perhaps even Daniel's vulnerability to his brother's manipulation. The question was, whether he had prepared me enough to win a fight I never knew was coming. Helen led me past the main library toward a weathered storage building I hadn't explored yet. Unlike the pristine renovated structures on the rest of the property, this building retained its original rustic character, deliberately unimproved to appear unimportant. "Your husband was a careful man," Helen said, producing an old iron key. "After his brother's first visit 2 years ago, he became even more cautious." "They visited before? Thomas never mentioned that." Helen nodded grimly. "Showed up unannounced once they caught wind of the timber rights discovery on neighboring properties. Your husband was here supervising construction of the writing studio. They didn't recognize him at first. He'd grown a beard during his treatment." The casual mention of Thomas's treatment sent a fresh wave of pain through me. While I'd been obliviously managing the Seattle library, my husband had been here, sick, creating this sanctuary while fending off his predatory brothers. "What happened?" He observed them from a distance, then left without revealing himself. That night, he made changes to the property plans. Helen unlocked the storage building door. Starting with this, the door swung open to reveal an ordinary-looking storage interior. Old equipment, filing cabinets, dust motes dancing in beams of sunlight filtering through gaps in the walls. Helen moved confidently to the back corner, shifting several boxes to expose a trap door set into the concrete floor. Your husband installed this entrance last winter. The workers thought they were building a document vault. She pulled the heavy door upward, revealing sturdy wooden stairs descending into darkness. After you, Mrs. Harrison. Curiosity overcoming apprehension, I followed Helen down the stairs. At the bottom, she flipped a switch, and lights flickered on, revealing a concrete tunnel stretching forward into the earth. What is this place? Your husband called it insurance. I call it genius. Helen gestured for me to follow as she walked the tunnel. The Harrison brothers think they know the full extent of the property and its value. They don't. The tunnel extended perhaps 60 yards before opening into a large concrete room filled with filing cabinets, a desk with computer equipment, and walls covered with maps and documents. Welcome to Thomas's command center, Helen said, a hint of pride in her voice. Everything he collected about his brothers, their business dealings, and the true value of Willow Ridge Estate. I moved to the nearest wall where a detailed survey map was pinned, showing not just the estate but surrounding properties for miles. Green markings indicated timber locations with handwritten notes about species, board feet calculations, and extraction challenges. I don't understand, I said, turning to Helen. Thomas knew about the timber? Not at first. He bought this place to renovate for you, pure and simple. But about 2 years ago, when the Thornton land showed valuable timber, he hired forestry consultants to survey Willow Ridge secretly. Helen pointed to the map. They found something unexpected. The most valuable timber isn't in the eastern section where everyone's looking. It's here, in the northern acres that look worthless. I studied the map more carefully, noting the concentration of green markings on the rugged, apparently unusable portion of the property that stretched into the foothills. Land Richard hadn't even mentioned in his proposed division. The timber company surveys missed it because the access is so difficult, Helen continued. Your husband verified it with 3 independent experts, swearing them to secrecy, so the property is even more valuable than his brothers realize? Exponentially. But that's not all. Helen moved to a filing cabinet, withdrawing a thick folder. Thomas documented decades of questionable business practices by all 3 brothers. Tax evasion, fraud, misappropriation of partnership funds, enough evidence to ruin them professionally if it ever came to light. I leafed through the meticulous documentation, recognizing Thomas's thorough approach to problem solving. Email printouts, financial records, sworn statements from former employees. He had built an airtight case against his brothers. Why would he collect all this? Protection. Helen sat at the desk, gesturing for me to take the other chair. He knew they'd come after the estate once he was gone. He wanted you to have leverage. I thought of Richard's smug confidence, Graham's legal maneuvering, their quick work turning Daniel against me. He anticipated everything. Not everything, Helen said quietly. He didn't expect them to get to your son so quickly. The reminder of Daniel's betrayal stung. They're manipulating him with half-truths and promises of wealth, playing on his grief. He lost his father, Helen added. Suddenly they're offering connection to him through shared blood and history. Powerful draw for a young man mourning his dad. She was right. Daniel had always been Daddy's boy, sharing Thomas's analytical mind and love of puzzles. His death had left Daniel adrift, vulnerable to anyone offering connection to him. What do I do now? I asked, half to myself. That depends on what you want, Helen replied. You could sell everything. Property, timber rights, the whole package, and walk away wealthy but perhaps forever estranged from your son. You could fight the brothers legally using this leverage, which might win the battle but worsen family wounds. Or what? Or you could do what your husband always did. Think 3 steps ahead and find the path no one expects. I considered this as I continued examining the command center. On the desk sat a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Thomas as a teenager, standing proudly beside a stack of books, his face alight with an innocent joy I'd rarely glimpsed in the man I married. That's from his acceptance to university, Helen said, noticing my focus on the photo. Your husband's escape from this place. The only bright spot in his childhood here, from what he told me. His brothers destroyed his book collection when he was away, just to hurt him, burned everything in the fireplace. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Thomas's support of my love for literature despite having no personal collection of his own. The rare books in the vault weren't just a gift. they were his reclamation of something precious his brothers had stolen from him. I picked up the photograph, a plan beginning to form in my mind. Helen, does the laptop with Thomas's videos work down here? She nodded. There's a secure network throughout the property, your husband made sure of it. Good. I need to watch the next few videos ahead of schedule. Then I need you to arrange a meeting for me. With whom? First, my son, alone, away from his uncles, then my attorney, and finally... I glanced at the wall of evidence Thomas had compiled against his brothers. I think I'd like to speak with those timber company representatives who've been making offers on the property. Helen smiled for the first time since we'd entered the hidden bunker. You're planning something your husband would approve of. I'm planning something worthy of the man who loved me enough to create all this, I corrected, new determination steadying my voice. And I'm going to need your help. Whatever you need, Helen promised. Your husband gave me this position when no one else would hire a woman my age in this field. I owe him everything. And by extension, I owe you. This was yet another side of Thomas I hadn't known. His quiet generosity extending beyond our immediate family, changing lives I'd never even heard about. As we left the bunker, carefully concealing the entrance again, I felt a strange sense of connection to my late husband, not the grief that had dominated the past weeks, but a partnership that somehow continued beyond death. He had left me not just a property and material security, but tools and knowledge to forge my own path forward. The Harrison brothers believed they were facing a naive widow out of her depth. They had no idea what was coming. Over the next 48 hours I barely slept, fueled instead by determination and the growing clarity of my plan. I watched a week's worth of Thomas's videos in a single night, each one revealing more of his strategy and the depth of his foresight. They'll try to divide and conquer, he warned in one recording, as if speaking directly to my current situation. Richard will be the friendly face, Graham the legal threat, Marcus the silent observer. And they'll target Daniel. He's their easiest path to destabilizing your position. In another video he walked through the northern section of the property, the supposedly worthless acres his brothers had deliberately excluded from their proposal. This land looks like nothing, Maggie. Rocky hills, difficult terrain, poor access. That's why it's perfect. No one looks closely at what appears valueless. Armed with Thomas's insights and my own growing understanding of what I faced, I arranged to meet Daniel at a small restaurant in the nearest town. 30 kilometers from the estate, neutral territory, away from both the Harrison brothers' influence and the emotional pull of Thomas's carefully crafted sanctuary. He arrived 20 minutes late, defensive posture already in place before he even sat down. I can't stay long. Uncle Richard is taking me to meet the family attorney this afternoon. Uncle Richard, I repeated mildly. You've become quite close in 4 days. He flushed. They've been nothing but welcoming and kind, which is more than I can say for you. You're treating them like enemies instead of Dad's family. I sipped my coffee, choosing my next words carefully. Do you remember that philosophy course you took junior year? The professor who talked about perspective, how where you stand completely changes what you see. What does that have to do with anything? You've only heard their perspective on this situation. I'm asking you to consider there might be another view. Your Dad's dead, he said bluntly, pain flashing across his features. And he obviously didn't trust either of us enough to tell us about this place while he was alive. I reached into my bag and withdrew a tablet. Actually, he left something for both of us. What is that? Your father made videos, Daniel, hundreds of them, messages to guide me, us. After he was gone, I turned the tablet to face him, queuing up the specific video Thomas had labeled for Daniel when he needs it. His face paled. He made videos? He knew he was dying, I said softly, finally sharing the truth. He was diagnosed 5 years ago with chronic kidney disease. He chose not to tell us, wanted to spare us watching him decline. That's impossible, he would have told me. But uncertainty had crept into his voice. Watch the video, Daniel. Hear it from him. With trembling fingers he pressed play. Thomas's face appeared, healthy, vibrant, his eyes crinkling with the smile that was so uniquely his. Hello, my brilliant boy. If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and knowing you, you're probably angry about all the secrets I kept. He chuckled softly. You never did like being kept in the dark about anything, even as a child. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes as his father continued. I should have told you I was sick, should have given you time to prepare, to ask all those questions you're so good at asking. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years together to be normal, not overshadowed by my diagnosis. I hope someday you'll forgive me for that choice. Thomas shifted, leaning closer to the camera. But there's something else you need to know, something about my brothers, that I've never shared with you. Our estrangement wasn't some petty family squabble, Daniel. They embezzled my portion of our father's estate when I was 20, used my name on fraudulent documents while I was away at university. When I discovered it and threatened to expose them, they threatened to implicate me as a willing participant. Daniel's hand covered his mouth, his eyes never leaving the screen. I left Canada, started over in Seattle, met your mother, built a life, raised you. It was more than enough. His expression hardened. But my brothers never changed. Whatever they're telling you now, remember this. They've wanted control of the family property for decades, not out of sentiment but pure greed. And they'll use anyone, including my son, to get it. The video ended, freezing on Thomas's concerned face. Daniel sat motionless, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. He was protecting us, he whispered finally. All this time. From more than just his illness, I confirmed gently. Your uncles aren't the family connection they're pretending to be. They're opportunists who see you as their easiest path to what they want. He wiped his tears, anger replacing grief in his expression. They've been lying to me, haven't they? About everything, not everything. The estate is worth millions. That part is true, but they haven't told you about the northern section they conveniently excluded from their proposal, or the true extent of the timber there. Understanding dawned in his eyes. They're trying to cheat us. Us? I repeated, hope flickering. Does that mean you're back on my side? Mom, I never left your side, He looked down, ashamed. I wanted to feel connected to Dad through his family. They had stories about him as a kid, photos I'd never seen. I understand, I assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Grief makes us vulnerable in ways we can't anticipate. But now we need to be smarter than they are. Together, Daniel straightened, his expression shifting from devastation to determination, so like his father that my heart ached. What's the plan? I smiled, feeling the first real sense of confidence since this ordeal began. First, we're meeting my attorney this evening. Not the family attorney your uncles want to use, but someone recommended by Thomas's lawyer in Seattle. Then tomorrow, we have an appointment with Northern Cascades Timber, the logging company. Why? Because knowledge is leverage. And right now, we know something your uncles don't. Exactly where the timber is, and how much there really is. I showed him the forestry surveys from Thomas's command center. They think they're dealing with an uninformed widow and a naive son. Time to show them exactly who they're really facing. For the first time since Thomas's death, Daniel laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. Dad always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met. That underneath that quiet librarian was a tactical genius who could outthink anyone if properly motivated. Did he really say that? I asked, surprised. All the time. He smiled, wiping away the last of his tears. He also said that the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Margaret Harrison. As we left the restaurant together, I felt a shift in the dynamic of this battle. The Harrison brothers had unwittingly united us instead of dividing us. They had no idea that their apparent early success with Daniel had only set the stage for their ultimate defeat. Later that evening, with Daniel beside me, I laid out my complete plan to the attorney Thomas had selected for this exact scenario. His expression moved from professional interest to undisguised admiration as he grasped the full scope of what I proposed. Mrs. Harrison, he said finally, your husband said you would surprise me with your strategic thinking. He was right. My husband, I replied, was right about a great many things, including, it seemed, his belief in my ability to not just survive his death, but to emerge stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal. The Harrison brothers arrived at Willow Ridge Estate exactly when I expected, 10 o'clock sharp, 6 days after my meeting with Daniel. Their black Range Rover crunched up the gravel driveway with the confidence of men who believed victory was merely a formality. Behind them followed a silver Lexus I didn't recognize, likely their attorney or financial advisor. I watched from the great room window, dressed not in the casual clothes they'd seen previously but in a tailored suit I'd purchased specifically for this meeting. Appearances matter when staging a coup, and I intended to present myself not as a grieving widow but as the formidable opponent Thomas had always known me to be. "They're here," I called to Daniel, who emerged from the kitchen looking equally professional in a dark suit, his father's watch, one of Thomas's most treasured possessions, prominently displayed on his wrist. "Ready?" he asked, nervousness and determination warring in his expression. "Completely." I squeezed his hand. "Remember, let them talk themselves into a corner first." Helen appeared from the back of the house. The others arrived through the service entrance. "They're set up in the dining room as you requested." I nodded appreciation. Perfect timing. The doorbell rang, and Helen moved to answer it with the practiced deference of a curator who knew her role in this carefully choreographed performance. "Good morning, gentlemen," I heard her greet them. "Mrs. Harrison and Mr. Daniel are expecting you. This way, please." They entered with the easy entitlement of men accustomed to controlling rooms. Richard led, followed by Graham with his ever-present legal portfolio, and Marcus bringing up the rear. Behind them walked a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated corporate authority. "Margaret." Richard nodded, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. This is Walter Chen, CEO of Pacific Rim Timber. We thought it might be productive to have an industry expert join our discussion about the property's potential." So they'd brought a timber executive to intimidate me with technical jargon and market valuations. Predictable. "How thoughtful," I replied pleasantly. "I've had the dining room prepared for our meeting, shall we?" I led them through the house, noting their assessing glances at the renovations Thomas had completed. In the formal dining room, a large table had been set with documents at each place, water carafes and coffee service. The picture of professional preparation. "Please sit," I gestured. "I believe we have much to discuss." As they settled into their chairs, expressions of confidence still firmly in place, I remained standing at the head of the table. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was educational." Richard's smile widened, clearly interpreting my comment as submission. "We're pleased you've had time to consider our offer. With Mr. Chen's expertise, we can discuss the most advantageous arrangement for dividing the property's assets." "Yes, division," I mused, picking up a remote control from the table. "That's precisely what I'd like to discuss." I pressed a button, and a hidden screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The brothers exchanged surprised glances. Clearly they hadn't expected this level of preparation. "If you'll direct your attention to the presentation," I continued, clicking the remote again. A detailed map of Willow Ridge Estate appeared on the screen, showing property boundaries, topographical features, and geological formations. "This is the complete survey of Willow Ridge," I explained. "All 1,800 acres, not just the southern 1,200 acres mentioned in your proposal." Graham shifted uncomfortably. "The northern section is undevelopable, rocky terrain. We excluded it for simplicity's sake." "How considerate," I smiled, "except for one small detail." Another click, and the map overlaid with timber density locations. The complete forestry survey from Thomas's command center, showing the massive old-growth reserve beneath the worthless northern acres. Walter Chen straightened in his chair, professional mask slipping as he leaned forward to study the projection with sudden intense interest. "As you can see," I continued calmly, "the primary old-growth timber extends predominantly beneath the northern section, the acres you so generously offered to exclude from our fair division." Richard's face flushed. "These surveys are unreliable. Pacific Rim's analysis indicates." Actually interrupted a new voice as the connecting door opened. "Those surveys have been verified by 3 independent forestry teams." The Harrison brothers turned in shock as Martin Drummond, CEO of Northern Cascades Timber, Pacific Rim's primary competitor, entered the room, followed by my attorney and 2 individuals in business attire. "What is this?" Richard demanded, half rising from his chair. "This," I said pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value and future of Willow Ridge Estate. Mr. Drummond has expressed significant interest in the property's potential, particularly after reviewing the complete forestry data my husband compiled. Walter Chen shot a betrayed glance at the Harrison brothers. You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights to this property. They don't, my attorney interjected smoothly, placing additional documents on the table. Mrs. Harrison holds clear, uncontested title to the entire property, including all timber and mineral rights. The documents you've been shown by the Harrison brothers have no legal standing whatsoever. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This property has been in the Harrison family for generations. Thomas had a moral obligation. Moral obligations, Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice steady despite his white-knuckled grip on his water glass. Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you stole his inheritance? Or forged his signature on loan documents? Or threatened to implicate him in your financial crimes if he exposed you? The brothers froze, color draining from their faces. What exactly is he talking about? Walter Chen asked, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps these will clarify matters, I said, nodding to my attorney, who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. Copies of documentation my husband preserved regarding certain historical transactions involving Harrison family assets. I believe the statute of limitations has expired on some of these matters, I continued, but the Canadian financial regulatory authorities might still find others quite interesting. Graham opened his envelope, scanning the contents with increasing alarm. These are private family matters, he sputtered, completely irrelevant to the current discussion. On the contrary, I countered, finally taking my seat at the head of the table. They establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your credibility in these negotiations. Behavior that continued when you deliberately misled Mr. Chen about your standing to negotiate for this property. The room fell silent as the Harrison brothers realized the completeness of their exposure. Thomas had documented everything. Their historical crimes against him, their recent manipulations, their attempts to seize valuable assets while appearing generous. What do you want? Richard finally asked, his confident facade crumbling. I want you to leave Willow Ridge Estate and never return, I stated simply. I want you to cease all attempts to contest my ownership or manipulate my son. In exchange, these documents remain private, viewable only by the people in this room. Walter Chen stood abruptly. I believe my company's involvement in this matter has been based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Harrison, I'll be in touch directly regarding any future discussions of timber rights. He shot a disgusted look at the brothers before exiting. Richard's expression hardened as he watched his timber company ally depart. You have no idea what you're doing, Margaret. The extraction costs for the northern section are prohibitive. The logistics alone. Actually, Martin Drummond interjected, Northern Cascades has developed new low-impact extraction technology specifically suited to difficult terrain. We're prepared to make Mrs. Harrison an offer that acknowledges both the challenges and the exceptional potential of this property. As the meeting continued, transforming from the Harrison brothers' planned takeover into my carefully orchestrated counter-offensive, I caught Daniel's eye across the table. His slight smile conveyed everything: pride, vindication, and the bittersweet acknowledgement that Thomas had prepared us for this moment, even from beyond the grave. By the time the Harrison brothers departed 2 hours later, defeated, exposed, and legally bound by the settlement agreement my attorney had prepared in advance, the future of Willow Ridge Estate had been secured exactly as Thomas had envisioned, not divided among greedy relatives, not sold to the highest bidder, but preserved as a legacy for the family he had chosen and loved, Daniel and me. As their vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Helen appeared at my side. Your husband would be proud, she said quietly. You outmaneuvered them exactly as he believed you would. I watched the dust settle on the driveway, a strange mix of emotions washing through me. Triumph tinged with grief. Strength emerging from vulnerability. We're not finished yet, I replied, thinking of the videos still waiting on Thomas's laptop, the future stretching before us. This was just the first battle, but it was a battle we had decisively won, using weapons Thomas had meticulously prepared, and the strength he had always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself. The weeks following the Harrison brothers' defeat passed in a blur of practical matters: legal documents finalizing our settlement agreement, meetings with Northern Cascades Timber to structure a mutually beneficial extraction arrangement, and careful inventory of everything Thomas had created at Willow Ridge Estate. Daniel stayed with me through it all, his initial resentment about his father's secrets transforming into appreciation for his foresight. We established a routine of watching his daily videos together each morning, both of us finding comfort and guidance in his posthumous presence. "Did you have any idea?" Daniel asked one evening as we sat on the veranda watching the sun set behind the western hills that contained our newfound wealth. "Any suspicion at all that Dad was sick or planning all this?" I considered the question, carefully, searching my memories for missed signals. There were small things that make sense in retrospect. His insistence on updating our wills 5 years ago, the way he'd sometimes look at us at dinner, almost memorizing our faces, his sudden interest in taking photos of ordinary moments. "I thought he was just going through a midlife appreciation phase," Daniel said, smiling sadly. "In a way he was," I agreed, "just not for the reasons we assumed." I sipped my tea, remembering. The biggest change was how he stopped putting things off. Your father was always a someday person about personal matters. Someday we'd take that trip to Japan. Someday he'd learn woodworking. Someday we'd renovate the kitchen. Then suddenly, he started doing things rather than talking about them. "Like buying this place," Daniel nodded. "Creating something lasting," exactly. I attributed it to him finally feeling financially secure enough to indulge some dreams. I shook my head, still coming to terms with the magnitude of what he'd concealed. I never imagined he was racing against time, creating a legacy because he knew he wouldn't be here to see it mature. The Northern Cascades representatives had been impressed when I'd outlined my conditions for their access to the timber beneath our property. Rather than selling the rights outright for a lump sum as most landowners did, I had insisted on a structured arrangement that prioritized environmental protection, employed sustainable harvesting methods, and established a substantial trust for reforestation after extraction was complete. Mrs. Harrison, their lead negotiator, had said, "These terms are highly unusual in the industry." "Then perhaps the industry needs more unusual terms," I had replied, channeling Thomas's quiet confidence. "The trees have been there for centuries. They can stay there until we agree on responsible methods to harvest them." To my surprise, Martin Drummond, the CEO, had been intrigued rather than deterred by my approach. "Your husband mentioned you were an environmental studies major before switching to literature," he'd noted. "He said you'd insist on doing this right, not just profitably." Another piece of Thomas's planning revealed. He'd clearly been in communication with select industry leaders, laying groundwork for negotiations he knew would follow his death. 2 months after claiming my inheritance, I stood in the writing studio Thomas had created, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating a blank screen on the computer. After decades away from creative writing, I had finally opened a new document, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Today's subject waited patiently in my thoughts. The story of Willow Ridge itself, of transformation and redemption, of love persisting beyond death. Helen had been teaching me about rare book preservation, my professional skills adapting to this new context. We'd begun cataloging plans for opening portions of the collection to researchers and students, extending Thomas's gift beyond our family to benefit others who shared our passion for literature. "Mom," Daniel appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. "Today's video is different. I think you should see it alone." I set down my coffee, curious. We had fallen into the routine of watching Thomas's daily messages together over breakfast, finding comfort in the shared experience. "Different how?" "It's marked specifically for month 3, day 10. He titled it, 'When Margaret Starts Writing Again.'" He handed me the computer with a gentle smile. He knew you would eventually. Alone in the studio, surrounded by the tools of a passion I was rediscovering. I opened the laptop and pressed play. Thomas appeared, seated in this very room before any of the writing equipment had been installed, the space bare except for the magnificent windows. "Hello, my love," he began, his smile warm and intimate. "If you're watching this, you found your way back to your art, back to the passion you set aside for our family all those years ago." I touched the screen gently, tears welling in my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy," he continued, "what we leave behind, what marks we make on the world. Most people think of legacy in terms of children or wealth or accomplishment. But there's another kind of legacy, the enabling of possibility in those we love. He gestured to the empty room around him. This space isn't finished yet, but in my mind, I can see it completed, filled with light and words and your creations. I imagine you sitting before a computer, fingers on keys, finally giving form to the stories you've carried inside you all these years. I glanced at the half-finished manuscript on my screen, struck by how closely it aligned with Thomas's imagination. I've structured everything to give you freedom, Maggie, he continued. Financial security through the timber rights, protection from my brother's interference, a beautiful space to create. But what you do with that freedom, that's your legacy to build, not mine to dictate. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression intense. The estate, the books, the writing studio, they're not the inheritance, they're just the tools. The real inheritance is possibility, the chance to become more fully yourself without constraint. I paused the video, overwhelmed by the depth of his understanding. Thomas had known me better than I knew myself, had seen the dormant writer still alive within the practical librarian and devoted mother I'd become. When I resumed the video, his expression had softened again. I have one request, though it's yours to accept or decline. In the storage closet behind this room is something I commissioned before my diagnosis. It's blank, waiting. When you're ready, truly ready, I hope you'll create something for it. Something that captures not just what you see, but what you feel about this place that brought me back to my beginnings and will carry you into your future. The video ended with his familiar sign-off, "Until tomorrow, my love." I sat motionless for several minutes, processing his words. Then, moved by impulse, I went to the storage closet and found exactly what he'd described. An enormous blank leather journal, custom-made, with my name embossed in gold on the cover. A journal meant for the novel I'd always dreamed of writing. It was the perfect canvas to create something lasting, a focal point for the creativity Thomas had helped me reclaim. Over the following weeks, as autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues, I wrote countless pages, trying to capture the essence of Willow Ridge Estate and what it represented. The story took shape gradually, not a traditional memoir, but a blending of real and imagined elements. The estate as it existed now in the foreground, rendered with careful detail. Beneath that, layers showing what had come before. The abandoned property Thomas had purchased, the family farm of his childhood, and beneath it all, the ancient land that had witnessed generations come and go. Threading through these temporal layers were two journeys. A man seeking redemption, a woman discovering strength, their paths intertwining across time. When the first draft was finally complete, Daniel read it with tears in his eyes. "It's him," he said, "and you, and this place. The past, present, and future all woven together." "Legacy," I said simply. "Not what's left behind, but what continues forward." That evening, as I watched the sunset from the veranda of what was now truly my home, I felt Thomas's presence not as a ghost or memory, but as a continuing partnership. He had given me not just material security but a framework for reinvention, the freedom to discover who Margaret Harrison might become when unconstrained by circumstance. The timber would provide financial stability for generations, the estate would evolve according to our stewardship, and I would continue bringing beauty into the world through newly rediscovered talents, creating my own legacy alongside the one Thomas had so carefully prepared. Tomorrow's video waited on the laptop inside. Another day of guidance and connection across the boundary that separated us. But increasingly, I found myself looking forward rather than back, grateful for his foresight but eager to write the next chapters of this unexpected story myself. The forbidden estate had become hallowed ground. Not a place of secrets and pain as Thomas had once known it, but a sanctuary of possibility. His final and greatest gift to me.